Hey guys, Dan here with Battlefield Curator. Some people just really are disgusted by the sight of a butchered, sporterized, bubbified military surplus rifle. What are they good for? Can you still use them to hunt with? Or should you just take the time and energy to restore them back to original military configuration? Well, let's answer some of those questions. Let's go over why some people still use them today and why some people just totally hate sporterized military surplus rifles. Well, the first thing I'd ask you to do is to pulverize that like button and subscribe if you haven't. It really helps out with the channel. And if you'd also like to help out with the channel even more, go check out some of the merchandise I got. Link in the description. All right, so historically, military rifles have been sporterized for well over a century. I've seen some examples from the 1800s where it looks like, yeah, these rifles were used in the military and then they were phased out of service and civilians got a hold of them and definitely chopped the stocks and maybe done some crude things to them, but hey, they were a useful tool back then. Essentially, these military rifles are a good basis for turning into and converting to a hunting rifle, which essentially is a useful tool, especially back in the day. There was a lot of hunters. You gotta think fur, you gotta think meat to put on the food on the table, you gotta think survival in the wilderness, you got to think varmint eradication. There was a lot of uses for rifles back in the day, more so than today. These days, you can probably find yourself a pretty ugly or pretty decent looking World War II or maybe even a World War I example of a sporterized bolt action military rifle. Yes, there are some hideous examples out there. Some of them even have scopes. Some of them don't have scopes. Some of them have a lot of history tied to them and are kind of rare. Some of them are quite abundant, like Lee Enfields. Out of like the many sporterized rifles I've seen a lot of Lee Enfields, number 1 Mark IIIs and number 4 Mark I stars. So essentially, you have some options there. Ammo-wise, most people would probably want to pick something that you can find ammo for on the shelves. Currently, 303 British is a little bit harder to find and a little bit more expensive than most other calibers out there. So if somebody's going to find a sporterized rifle, it'd probably be more like a 1903 that they would want. Now, also take into consideration that the prices of some of these sporterized military surplus rifles are kind of high. A lot of people think that just because it's an old military rifle, it's been sporterized, because the old military rifle has that history, it's probably worth a lot. No, not really. I'd say it's probably, most of them are probably worth less than $400, which for nowadays, you can get a brand new hunting rifle for around that. Or even better, get a better deal on some of them. You might be able to get a used hunting rifle that's already been sighted in and has a scope and everything for way less than that. Yeah, so price-wise, I'd say that it might not make sense to go out and buy one, but if you can get a good deal on one, then you have it. And then you got to make a decision. Do you want to restore it to original military configuration, spend that time, money, and energy into that, and try to make it worth something, maybe make it a little bit more valuable than what it is now? Obviously, some people do it because it increases the value of the rifle. Some people do it because it brings it back to its nostalgic original configuration, where it's proper, and they're saving history, essentially. These rifles were highly abundant back in the day. People sporterized them to go hunting with because they were dirt cheap. You can go to any of your hardware stores and probably find sporterized rifles for a lot cheaper than your average hunting rifle. We're talking 1950s, 1960s, where it probably made sense to go and buy a sporterized hunting rifle and save some money rather than buying a brand new hunting rifle. Nowadays, things have changed. Nowadays, old military rifles have a collector value tied to them, and it makes them quite expensive. And most people don't even want to use them to shoot too often anyways. There's a lot of history tied to these old rifles, and I think a lot of people really see them as museum collectibles, and the prices have gone quite high at auctions. So if you find a military rifle in original configuration, it really wouldn't make sense to sporterize it. If you're going to look for something to go hunt with, probably find a sporterized one already. It'd probably be easier that way anyways. and cheaper. If you're trying to determine whether or not to use one to go hunting with, whether it be viable, yeah, it's pretty viable. If you're trying to save a little bit on money, probably not as viable. Now you gotta think, not only were these rifles cheap and abundant back in the day, but you can easily modify them, cut the stock, and reduce the weight to turn them into a hunting rifle. As a military rifle, these had extra wood on the fore ends and extra metal to kind of protect the components and increase accuracy after firing a lot. Especially with Lee Enfields, there's a lot of balancing up at the fore end and the front to help with sustained fire. So even as the barrel got hotter and all the mechanisms were moving, you could still get accurate shots on target after firing a whole lot. There was also the front sight protectors and the barrel bands for the sling. So when somebody sporterizes these rifles, they take all that stuff out and they throw them away, sadly. So the big reason to sporterize a rifle like that would be for weight reduction. And when there's more mass in the front of a rifle, it actually feels heavier when you're holding it. You could get fatigued more because it feels more heavy. But if you reduce all that mass and then say you put a scope up here in the back, the more weight you put in the back, really your body it's closer to your body, so you can sustain that weight for a longer period of time without getting fatigued. Some people will hunt hogs, some people will hunt deer, and some people will go track deer and track hog. So when they're carrying these rifles out into the wilderness, especially if their hunting spots are further out, they're having to carry this rifle around the woods. Now, some people say, well, yeah, military rifles, you just carry one of those around anyways and you'll be all right. Some people just don't enjoy tracking around the woods with a heavy military rifle. They'd rather just walk around with something that was lightweight so they'd get less fatigued. Then some people argue, well, if the military did it, why can't your average American hunter do it? Okay, well, yes, they're not in combat and they don't need to have all that wood on that rifle so they can reduce the weight of it. That's one reason why people did that. And some people say, well, why do you have to tap it for a scope? Why can't you just use the iron sights? Well, you also have to think that some people have bad eyesight. In 2023 right here, anyone can get eye surgery. Well, anyone young enough can get eye surgery, and if they're, talk to a doctor or whatever. But back then, you didn't have eye surgery. You pretty much, if you had bad eyesight, you wore spectacles. And a scope will help with target identification in the woods, especially because it'd be hard to kind of see in the woods if you already have bad eyesight. So a lot of people would tap them for a scope to help out. Maybe they were of older age and they just had problems seeing anyways. So we've established a few things here. The history behind sporterized military surplus rifles, and yes, you can use them to go hunting with as long as the barrel and the bore is good and they're accurate. They're pretty much the iron sights are set or the scopes zeroed. So, but some people want to buy these sporterized military surplus rifles to configure back into original condition and then take them hunting. So yeah, you could do that as well. If you are in the market for buying military surplus rifles, and let's say you're a tinkerer, you can buy a sporterized surplus rifle and you can reconfigure it to military surplus configuration as long as it's salvageable, and you can go hunting with it in that configuration as long as it's accurate and zeroed and all that. I've actually done quite a few of these reconfiguring of military surplus rifles. I've found tons of sporters throughout the years, and I've configured quite a few of them back to original condition. Some of them were pretty poorly sporterized. Some of them were actually really well done. Some of the ones that were really well done looks like the importers that were importing them into the country back in the 60s. They also sporterized them. Not just Bubba Backyard, but some of these importers sporterize them because they realize that, hey, if something's already configured to go hunting, where the stock is cut and we put a scope on it, then the average consumer that doesn't have enough money to buy a real hunting rifle or wants to be cheap can buy some of these sporterized ones because there's just tons of these military rifles coming out of World War II. So the importer can do their own sporterization to these rifles and make an extra buck off of them, selling them out to the masses. So I've come across quite a few of them over the years, and here's a photo of a whole bunch of stocks that I have left over from sporterized rifles that I fixed. Now, this rifle right here, This one I had the intention of reconfiguring back to original condition. It's an importer Sporterized rifle. So this one is in really good condition, like immaculate. Bluing is great, the wood is great, the bore is amazing, the lands and grooves are really crisp, and the scope, it's pretty good. It keeps it zero. The thing is, when my son wanted to go hunting for the first time at 9 years old, I said, pick one of my rifles to go hunting with. Of course, he would pick the one with the scope, and he picked the one that looked more like a hunting rifle. And so he picked this Sporterized Lee Enfield No. 4 Mark 1 Star that was made in Long Branch, Canada. I said, okay, that's .303 British. That's a pretty heavy caliber. Let's go take it to the range and see how well you do with it. And if you zero it, then you can take it hunting. I had already zeroed that scope about a year or two before then. And so we went to the range and he shot it pretty well. So he was on paper and I said, okay, well, we'll go hunting. And we went hunting. I kind of had low expectations for his first hunt. But after playing a whole bunch of Hunter Call the Wild during the summertime, he actually took this rifle and used it efficiently and effectively against his first deer, a buck, an 8-point buck. And so we took it to a processor and got the meat out of it, and he helped feed the family. And we got the buck mounted right here as his first buck that he ever got. And then the year after that, he did the same thing, a 6-point buck this time. And he got the meat, used the same rifle. So essentially, this Sporterized military surplus rifle now has an altered history. It not only has historical roots from World War II, but it also has family history and sentimental value. So I think for now, we'll keep it the way it is. Also, it's pretty hard to find a No. 4 stock anyways. So should you use a military surplus Sporterized rifle to go hunting with? Well, that's up to you. If you want to find one in store and just use it as is, make sure it's zeroed and all that, that's fine. If you want to go put it back to original configuration and use it that way, that's cool. You know, if you want to take one and you want to butcher it, well, it's your rifle, you can do what you want with it. Honestly, I prefer to curate history so as to not detract from its value. All right, if you like this kind of content, be sure to pulverize that like button and subscribe if you haven't. Also, be sure to check out the link in the description for some of that merch so you can help the channel grow, help me out, help others out. I will be donating some of the proceeds to museums and other historical societies and sites. So overall, everyone is benefiting from this channel. All right, see you next time and make it a great day.